My name is Sarah, I'm 27, and my golden child sister stole my husband, then my parents chose her side. Before I tell you about the ultimate revenge I got on all of them, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The bell on the door of my shop chimed, a pleasant little sound I usually loved. It was a crisp Chicago afternoon, and through the big glass window of Sarah's garden, the city felt alive. Inside, everything was calm. Rows of amber glass bottles filled with the organic skincare I'd built from nothing were lined up on clean, reclaimed wood shelves. The air smelled of lavender and chamomile. It was my sanctuary. My success. And then I saw her. For a second, my brain refused to process it. It was like seeing a ghost from a past life. But it was her. Jessica. She looked wrecked. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a thin, worn-out coat that wasn't nearly warm enough for the weather. Her usually perfect blonde hair was thrown into a messy bun, and dark, hollowed-out circles framed her eyes. And in her arms, bundled in a cheap-looking blanket, was a baby. My blood ran cold. I didn't move. I just stood behind the counter, my hands flat on the cool marble, watching her hesitate by the door. She looked around my shop, at my dream made real, and I saw a flicker of the old jealousy in her eyes before it was swallowed by desperation. Finally, she took a shaky step forward. "Sarah," she said, her voice thin and cracked. I didn't answer. I just stared. 2 years. 2 years since she, my husband, and my parents had shattered my entire world, and now here she was. I didn't know where else to go, she stammered, clutching the baby tighter. I need help, Sarah. Please. Help. She wanted my help. To understand the ice that filled my veins when she said that word, to understand why I felt nothing but the cold, hard satisfaction of justice looking at the wreckage she'd become, you have to go back. Back to a small house in Ohio, where I learned that in my family, there were only 2 roles. And I was never, ever meant to be the star. Growing up, my sister Jessica was the sun. And I was the shadow she cast. She was 3 years older, blonde, confident, everything my parents wanted in a daughter. I wasn't a bad kid. I was just quiet. I liked sketching in my notebook and experimenting with lotion recipes in the kitchen. Jessica liked being the center of attention, and my parents were more than happy to oblige. I'll never forget when I was 10. I was obsessed with art, and I found a local summer program for young artists. I begged my mom to sign me up. I had a whole portfolio of sketches to show her. She glanced at them and gave me that tight, polite smile. "Maybe next year, sweetheart," she said, her classic line. "Money's tight right now. You understand." I understood. Until 2 weeks later, when Jessica decided on a whim that she wanted to learn piano, and a brand new keyboard and a private instructor appeared like magic. Money wasn't tight for Jessica. It was only ever tight for me. It was 1,000 little cuts like that, every single day. For her 16th birthday, my parents scraped together enough money to buy her a used sedan. It wasn't fancy, but it was a car. It was freedom. For my 16th birthday, I got a small sheet cake from the grocery store with crooked lettering that said, "Happy birthday, Sarah." They even spelled my name wrong. The card said, "We are so proud of you." Proud of what? Surviving another year in the background? Their ultimate betrayal during those years, though, was my high school graduation. For Jessica, they rented out a banquet hall. They invited half the town. It was a massive affair, a celebration of their perfect daughter. When it was my turn, we had a small barbecue in the backyard. It felt more like an obligation than a celebration. I remember my dad clapping me on the shoulder, saying, "Well, we already did the big party for Jessica, so this is just more low-key." The words hung in the air, a perfect summary of my entire life, a low-key version of my sister's. I knew then I had to get out. I couldn't spend my life being the low-key daughter. So I worked my tail off in high school. I got straight A's, I volunteered, I did everything right. I got into one of the top cosmetic science programs in the country. This was it. This was my ticket out, my one shot to finally become someone they couldn't ignore. I remember the day I got the acceptance letter, my hands were shaking. I ran into the living room, ready to finally have a moment that was all mine. I held up the letter and said, I got in. Mom, Dad, I got in. My mother took the letter from my shaking hands. She read it, and a thin, tight smile appeared on her face. The same smile she'd used when I showed her my art sketches all those years ago. Well, that's wonderful, dear, she said, handing it back. It's a very good school. It looks expensive. My father chimed in from his armchair, not even looking up from the TV. Your mother's right, Sarah. We're still stretched pretty thin with Jessica's MBA payments. You know we don't have a separate college fund set aside for you. We'll have to see what's realistic. And just like that, the air went out of the room. My moment, the biggest achievement of my life, was reduced to a budget line item. A problem to be solved. There was no excitement, no "we're so proud of you," no celebration. It was just a new expense they hadn't planned for. An inconvenience. I ended up getting a mountain of student loans. I worked 2 part-time jobs all through college just to cover my rent and books. I barely scraped by. Meanwhile, Jessica had moved back home after getting her MBA. She didn't land her dream job right away, so my parents bent over backwards to make her comfortable. They turned the guest room into her own private apartment, paid her car insurance, and gave her a weekly allowance so she could go out with her friends without feeling stressed. She was 30 years old, living off my parents, while I was 20, working 40 hours a week on top of a full course load just to keep my head above water. The injustice of it was a constant, dull ache in my chest. When I'd come home for Christmas, exhausted and thin, my mom would say things like, "You need to take better care of yourself, Sarah." Then she'd turn around and offer to take Jessica on a shopping spree because she needed a new outfit for a job interview. If I mentioned I was struggling to pay a bill, my dad would give me a lecture on budgeting. But they'd co-sign a loan for Jessica to buy a new laptop because hers was getting a little slow. It wasn't just the money. It was the attention. The validation. I remember I won a small award for a skincare formula I developed in my junior year. I was so excited, I called home to tell them. My mom picked up. "Oh, that's nice, honey," she said, her voice distracted. "That's great. Hey, did I tell you? Jessica has a 3rd interview with that big marketing firm downtown. We have a really good feeling about this one." My achievement was a stepping stone to talk about Jessica's. My life was just the opening act for the main event. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to get it myself. If I wanted to be proud of something, I had to be proud on my own. Because in their eyes, I was just the other one. The responsible one. The one who didn't need their help because, frankly, they didn't have any help left to give. They had poured all their resources, their money, their hopes, their love, into their golden child. And for the rest of us, there was only whatever was left over. Usually, that was nothing. I promised myself that one day, I would build a life so successful, so full, that I wouldn't need anything from them ever again. I just never imagined that when I finally did, it would be the one thing my sister would decide she had to take from me. College was my escape, but it was also a grind. I spent my final year juggling classes, my internship, and a weekend job at a small, upscale boutique that sold artisanal cosmetics and perfumes. It wasn't glamorous, I was mostly restocking shelves and ringing up customers, but I loved being surrounded by the things I was passionate about. That shop is where I met Mark. He walked in one rainy Saturday afternoon. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and had a kind of easy confidence that made everyone in the room turn their heads. I figured he was just another wealthy guy looking for an expensive gift to impress a girlfriend. But he surprised me. He came right up to my counter and asked about a specific facial oil, questioning me about the ingredients, the sourcing, the formulation. He wasn't just reading a label, he was genuinely interested. We ended up talking for nearly an hour. Not just about skincare, but about business, about passion, about building something from the ground up. I learned he ran a successful tech startup, but he spoke about it with a quiet humility that was completely disarming. He listened to me talk about my dreams of creating my own skincare line with an intensity that no one, not even my own family, had ever shown me before. For the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. He came back the next week. And the week after that. He'd make up excuses to buy something small, but we both knew he was there to talk to me. Finally, he asked me out. I was a nervous wreck. I was a broke college student who bought her jeans at Target. He was a successful entrepreneur who drove a Porsche. But he didn't care about any of that. He said he admired my drive, my passion. He made me feel like the most interesting person in the world. Our relationship felt like a fairy tale. He was supportive in ways I wasn't used to. He'd send takeout to the library when I was studying late. He'd listen to me ramble about polymer chains and hyaluronic acid and act like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. He became my biggest cheerleader. A year later, on a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, he asked me to marry him. I said yes without a second of hesitation. It was the easiest decision I'd ever made. I had finally found my person, my first choice. Of course, when I told my parents, their reaction was predictably awful. A tech startup? Oh, he must be doing very well for himself, was the first thing my mother said. Not, congratulations, or, I'm so happy for you. It was all about his salary. My father was even worse. Well, at least you won't have to worry about those student loans anymore, he said with a chuckle. They didn't ask about the proposal. They didn't ask to see the ring. They just saw dollar signs. At our engagement dinner, my mother leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You know, Mark must have some successful friends. Jessica's been so unlucky in love. Maybe you could introduce her to someone." It felt like a punch to the gut. My happiness wasn't my own, it was a resource to be mined for my sister. The wedding was beautiful, but it was also the beginning of the end. Jessica showed up in a champagne-colored dress that was so close to white it made people stare. She spent the entire night fluttering around Mark's colleagues and investors, laughing too loudly at their jokes, acting less like the maid of honor and more like the hostess. The worst part came during the reception. She pulled me aside near the gift table, a fake, syrupy smile plastered on her face. "I'm so happy for you, Sarah," she said, squeezing my arm. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm just worried about you, Sarah. Mark's world is so high-powered. I saw him at a gala last month and some women, model types, were all over him. You need to keep a close eye on him, don't be too naive." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was such a strange, ugly thing to say on my wedding day. She framed it as concern, but it felt like a threat. A little drop of poison slipped into my ear when I was at my absolute happiest. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself she was just being a sister, maybe a clumsy, jealous one. But a cold feeling settled in my stomach, a feeling that something was deeply, deeply wrong. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you gave me a like, and it tells me you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1, and let me continue my story. The first year of our marriage was blissful. Mark was everything I'd ever dreamed of. He encouraged me to start developing my own product line in my spare time, even helping me set up a small lab in our guest room. I felt cherished, supported, and safe for the first time in my life. The little seed of doubt Jessica had planted on my wedding day withered and died. Or so I thought. About a month into our marriage, Jessica started showing up. Unannounced. At first, it was just a quick pop-in on a Saturday. Then it became a regular Tuesday afternoon thing. Then it was 3-4 times a week. She'd always have some flimsy excuse. Oh, I was in the neighborhood, or I was bored and just thought I'd come say hi. But she wasn't there to see me. If I was working in my lab, she'd barely glance in my direction. She'd make a beeline for the kitchen, where Mark was, or the living room, if he was watching TV. She was always perfectly dressed, full makeup, designer bag on her arm. She'd perch on a bar stool and watch him cook, laughing with this loud, theatrical laugh at everything he said. It made my skin crawl. She had this habit of touching him. A little brush of lint off his shoulder. A light touch on his arm as she made a point. It was all disguised as casual affection, but it felt possessive. Territorial. I tried to talk to Mark about it. I did it gently. Hey, don't you think it's a little weird how much Jessica is here? He just shrugged, not even looking up from his laptop. She's your sister, Sarah. She's probably just lonely. Don't be insecure. Insecure. The word was a slap in the face. It was the same as him saying, "You're crazy. You're overreacting." He made me feel like I was the problem. So I shut up. I tried to ignore the twisting in my gut every time her car pulled into our driveway. I tried to pretend the way she looked at my husband wasn't the way a predator looks at its prey. Things got worse. He started coming home from work later. It was always a late meeting or dinner with investors. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I was living with a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. My home, my sanctuary, no longer felt safe. It felt like enemy territory. The final straw came on a Thursday night. He was supposed to be home at 7 for dinner. At 9, he texted, "Just wrapping up. Be home soon." He didn't walk through the door until nearly midnight. The moment he stepped inside, I knew. I didn't even have to see his face. I could smell it. A perfume. It was a heavy, floral scent, jasmine and vanilla, with a top note of something sharp and sweet. As a cosmetic scientist, my nose is my instrument. I know every scent in my collection, every oil, every extract. And that scent was not one of mine. I just stood there in the hallway, frozen, as he walked past me, muttering something about a brutal meeting. My voice came out as a whisper. "What is that smell, Mark?" He stopped. He turned around slowly. He couldn't even meet my eyes. "What are you talking about?" "The perfume," I said, my voice getting stronger. "On your collar." "Who is she?" He looked at me then, and his face was a mask of guilt. He didn't even try to lie. He just ran a hand through his hair and let out a long, slow breath. The kind of breath a man takes before he shatters your entire world. "Sarah," he started, and his voice was full of that fake, pathetic pity. "Jessica and we're in love." The words didn't feel real. They just hung there in the air between us, obscene and impossible. My sister. My husband. My brain just shut down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt nothing. It was like I was watching a movie of someone else's life falling apart. The next day, while he was at work, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't stay there. In a daze, I called my mom. I was desperate. I just needed a place to land for a few days, to figure out what to do. I told her everything, the words spilling out of me in a broken, numb rush. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, my mother's voice, cool and distant. "Oh, honey. That's a lot. I'd love to help, but the house is under a full renovation right now. It's a complete mess. There's just no room." "Renovations?" They'd lived in that house for 30 years and had never so much as painted a wall. It was a lie. A cold, blatant lie. My hands trembling, I hung up and called my dad. I thought, maybe he'll be different. I told him the story. He cleared his throat. "It's just not a good time, sweetheart," he said, his voice awkward and strained. "You know how it is." I hung up the phone. And that's when the numbness finally shattered, and the pain hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete and total abandonment. My husband, my sister, my mother, my father. In the space of 24 hours, I had lost my entire family. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The days that followed are a blur of pain and paperwork. I found a cheap, tiny apartment on the worst side of town, the kind with stained carpets and a permanent smell of dampness. I hired a lawyer, a tired-looking woman who gave me a sympathetic glance over her glasses. It didn't take her long to give me the bad news. "You signed a prenuptial agreement, Sarah," she said, tapping a thick stack of papers. "It's ironclad. In the event of a divorce, you waive any claim to his business assets and property acquired during the marriage." I remembered signing it. Mark had presented it as a simple formality, a way to protect his business partners. I was so in love, so trusting, I would have signed anything he put in front of me. Now, that piece of paper was a weapon being used against me. His lawyer was ruthless. I walked away from my marriage with nothing but my personal savings, which amounted to a few $1,000s. I was officially divorced, broke, and homeless. But I still had my job at the boutique. It wasn't much, but it was a paycheck. It was a small island of normalcy in a sea of chaos. I thought, at least I have this. At least I can pay my rent. I was wrong. I showed up for work the following Monday, my eyes puffy from crying, but determined to put on a brave face. My manager, who had always been so warm and friendly, wouldn't look me in the eye. She called me into her tiny office. "Sarah," she said, staring at a spot on the wall behind my head. "I'm so sorry. We're going to have to let you go. It's a restructuring. It's not working out." It didn't make any sense. I was one of her best employees. I pleaded with her, asked her what I did wrong. She just kept muttering about corporate decisions and budget cuts. I walked out of that store in a daze, clutching my final paycheck. It felt like the universe was playing a sick joke on me. That evening, I got a text from Carol, an older woman I'd worked with. She was a kind, no-nonsense lady who had seen it all. "Meet me for coffee?" My treat. We met at a dingy little diner. She ordered me a slice of pie and slid it in front of me. "Eat," she said. "You look like a ghost." Then she leaned forward, her voice low. "It wasn't a restructuring, honey. It was Mark." I just stared at her. "He came into the store last week," she continued, her eyes full of fury on my behalf. "Spoke to the owner. Said you were unstable, that you were causing drama, and that your personal issues were bad for the business's reputation. The owner is a spineless coward who plays golf with Mark." He folded instantly. I felt a hot, white rage build in my chest, so intense it made me dizzy. It wasn't enough for him to destroy my heart, my marriage, my family. He had to destroy my livelihood, too. He had to salt the earth so nothing could ever grow again. But Carol wasn't finished. "And that's not all," she said, her voice even lower. I overheard the owner on the phone. "Mark called a few of our local suppliers, the ones you knew. The ones you told me you might want to work with someday. He told them you were untrustworthy. Warned them not to do business with you." That was the moment I truly understood the depth of his cruelty. It was a calculated, systematic annihilation of my life. He wasn't just leaving me, he was trying to erase me. When Carol dropped me off at my miserable little apartment, she pressed a crumpled wad of cash into my hand. "It's $200, she whispered, not letting me refuse. "For groceries." "You're a good kid, Sarah. Don't you let that monster win." I walked into my empty apartment, the crumpled bills clutched in my hand. An eviction notice had been taped to the door. I slid down to the floor, my back against the flimsy wood, and I just sat there in the darkness. I had no husband, no family, no job, no home, and a few $100s to my name. It wasn't just the bottom. It felt like I had crashed through the bottom and was still falling. I don't know how long I sat on that floor. Hours, maybe a whole day. The eviction notice stared at me like a tombstone. Every terrible thing my family had ever made me feel about myself echoed in that silence. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're second best. I was so close to believing them. So close to just giving up. Then I thought about Carol's $200. I thought about the fury in her eyes. And I thought about Mark's smug, satisfied face as he systematically tried to destroy me. A different feeling started to bubble up through the despair. Not sadness. Rage. A cold, hard, clarifying rage. I got up off the floor. I walked into the tiny, grimy kitchen. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. And I thought, they took my husband. They took my home. They took my job. But they can't take what's in my head. The next day, I went to a credit union on the other side of town. I took the few $1,000s I had left from my savings and used it to secure a small, high-interest personal loan. It was a huge risk. It was barely enough to cover a few months' rent and the absolute basic supplies. But it was a start. My apartment became my laboratory. I bought beakers and hot plates from a second-hand science supply store. Because of what Mark had done, I couldn't use any of the local Ohio suppliers. It was a setback, but I was done with setbacks. I spent weeks researching, making calls, and finally found small, family-run farms in Oregon and North Carolina that would ship me the high-quality, organic ingredients I needed. It was more expensive. It was harder. And it made me more determined. Every single night, after working a soul-crushing temp job doing data entry, I would come home and work until 2 or 3 in the morning. My tiny kitchen table was covered in glass bottles and notebooks full of formulas. I poured every ounce of my pain, my anger, and my knowledge into those bottles. I wasn't just making face oils and serums. I was creating my own lifeline. I called my little brand Sarah's Garden. It was a promise to myself that something could still grow from the ashes. I started small, on Etsy. For months, I made almost nothing. A sale here, a sale there. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee. I was so close to the edge, my loan money dwindling with every rent check. I remember one night, staring at my bank account, with less than $100 in it, thinking, this is it. I failed. And then, it happened. A small beauty blogger from California, someone with a decent but not huge following, bought one of my serums. A week later, she posted a video review. She didn't just like it. She raved about it. She talked about the quality of the ingredients, the unique formulation, the story of a small, woman-owned business. She called it her holy grail product. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing. And buzzing. And buzzing. It wouldn't stop. It was a flood of Etsy notifications. I had sold out of every single product I had. In one night. The momentum just kept building. That blogger's review was shared. Other bloggers bought my products. My little Etsy shop was featured on a popular website. The orders poured in, faster than I could fill them. I worked 18-hour days, my hands raw from bottling and labeling, my back aching. But I had never felt so alive. After 6 months of non-stop work, I had paid back my loan and had enough money saved to take the biggest leap of my life. I packed up my tiny apartment, left that town in Ohio without a single goodbye, and drove to Chicago. I found a small, affordable studio space in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't much more than a single room with a concrete floor, but when I stood in the middle of it, holding the keys in my hand, I burst into tears. It wasn't just a studio. It was my escape. It was my new beginning. It was the first piece of ground in my new life that was completely, totally mine. 2 years passed. 2 years of grueling work, of reinvesting every penny back into the business, of slowly, carefully building Sarah's garden into something real. The small studio gave way to a larger workshop, and finally, to my first storefront in a beautiful Chicago neighborhood. The same one Jessica had just stumbled into. Seeing her standing there, a ghost from a life I had fought tooth and nail to leave behind, was jarring. But as she stood there, pleading, I wasn't the same broken girl she had left behind in Ohio. I was a businesswoman. A survivor. I have nowhere else to go, she sobbed, and the baby in her arms started to fuss. Mark threw me out. He cut me off completely. I just looked at her, my face a blank mask. I felt a cold, detached curiosity. Threw you out? Why? I thought you two were so in love. The words were laced with acid, and she flinched. He found out, she stammered, looking down at the floor. I made a mistake. I was lonely. A mistake? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. You mean like the mistake you made when you slept with my husband? Or the mistake you made when you let my parents abandon me? You're going to have to be more specific, Jessica. Tears were streaming down her face now, the ugly, snotty kind. This wasn't the confident, radiant Jessica everyone loved. This was someone I didn't recognize. He found out I was cheating on him, she whispered, the words barely audible. And the baby, she trailed off, her voice breaking. I waited. The silence in the shop was deafening. She finally looked up at me, her eyes full of a terror I'd never seen before. The baby, he's not Mark's. The bomb dropped into the quiet of my shop, and for a moment, I actually felt my jaw go slack. The sheer, bottomless depth of her deceit was almost impressive. She hadn't just stolen my husband. She had built a whole new life on a mountain of lies, and now it had all come crashing down on top of her. I looked at the innocent baby in her arms, and a flicker of pity went through me, pity for this child, born into such a mess. But then I looked back at Jessica's face, the face of the sister who had smiled at me on my wedding day while poisoning my mind, and the pity vanished, replaced by a cold, hard finality. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice steady. You blew up my life for a man you then cheated on. You had another man's baby while living off my ex-husband's money. And now that the whole charade has fallen apart, you've come to me for a bailout. Is that about the size of it? She just sobbed harder. I have nothing, Sarah. No money, no home. Our parents, they can't help anymore. You're all I have left. I almost laughed. You have some nerve, Jessica. Coming here, to the life I built from the ashes of the one you burned down. You didn't care about me when I was on the floor of a miserable apartment with an eviction notice on the door. You didn't care when I was working 18-hour days to crawl out of the hole you all threw me in. You and Mom and Dad made your choice. You chose the golden child. I walked from behind the counter, my steps even and deliberate. I walked past her, to the front door of my shop, and I opened it. The chilly Chicago wind swept inside. You are not my problem anymore, I said, my voice as cold and sharp as the wind. She looked at me, her mouth open, as if she truly couldn't believe I wouldn't save her. As if, after everything, she still expected me to play the part of the dutiful, forgotten sister. You made your choices, I said, looking her dead in the eye. Now you live with them. Or go to Mom and Dad. Just stay out of my life. She stood there for a long moment, frozen, hope draining from her face. Then, with a final, broken sob, she turned and walked out of my shop, out into the cold, a desperate woman clutching the consequence of her own devastating choices. I watched her go, and then I reached out and pulled the heavy glass door shut. The bell chimed softly, and the click of the lock sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Closing the door on Jessica was like closing the final chapter of a very long, very painful book. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I just felt quiet. For the first time, the ghosts of my past weren't just silenced, they were gone. In the months that followed, pieces of their downfall trickled back to me, not because I went looking, but because the world is a small place. I heard from an old acquaintance that Jessica's attempt to paint herself as a victim on social media had backfired spectacularly. She had tried to drag Mark's name through the mud, but in doing so, she revealed her own infidelity. It destroyed what was left of Mark's reputation in his industry. Potential investors backed out of a new venture, and his company, already struggling, was eventually sold for a fraction of its worth to cover his debts and the cost of a very messy second divorce. About a year after Jessica showed up at my shop, Mark showed up, too. He looked older, tired. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollow look in his eyes. He tried to apologize. He said leaving me was the biggest mistake of his life. He said Jessica had ruined him. He actually had the audacity to ask if we could start over. I didn't even let him finish. I just looked at him and said, "The Sarah you knew is gone, Mark. You and my family destroyed her. The woman standing here built a life you have no place in." Then I told him to get out of my shop. He left without another word. As for my parents, they got the daughter they always invested in. After Jessica's life imploded, they did what they always did, they bailed her out. They sold the family home, the one they were so proud of, the one with no room for me, to pay off her staggering debts. I heard they now live in a cramped two-bedroom condo on the outskirts of town. My dad had to take a part-time job as a delivery driver to make ends meet, and my mom sews alterations out of their living room. They squandered their retirement, any potential inheritance they might have had, all for the daughter who gave them nothing back but trouble. They've never called to apologize. And me? Life is good. It's more than good. It's peaceful. Sarah's garden is thriving. We have 2 locations now and a national online presence. I built something beautiful and strong out of something ugly and broken. But the best part of my life has nothing to do with business. His name is David. He's an architect, a kind, funny, gentle man who loves me for who I am, not what I can do for him. He celebrates my successes as if they were his own and holds me when the memory of the past casts a rare shadow. We're getting married next spring. A small ceremony, with our chosen family, the friends who became my real support system. I'm even designing a custom scent for the wedding day, something that smells like hope and new beginnings. I finally have a life that is completely, totally mine. And it is beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. If any part of this resonated with you, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone learning to stand on their own 2 feet again? Let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.